Yajnavalkya came to Janaka, king of Videha, saying to himself, "I will not talk today." But earlier, while they were discussing the fire ceremony, Yajnavalkya had promised him any boon he wanted. Now the king asked the sage permission to question him. Janaka, Yajnavalkya, what is the light of man? Yajnavalkya, the sun is our light, for by that light we sit, work, go out, and come back. Janaka, when the sun sets, what is the light of man? Yajnavalkya, the moon is our light, for by that light we sit, work, go out, and come back. Janaka, when the sun sets, Yajnavalkya, and the moon sets, what is the light of man? Yajnavalkya, fire is our light, for by that we sit, work, go out, and come back. Janaka, when the sun sets, Yajnavalkya, and the moon sets, and the fire goes out, what is the light of man? Yajnavalkya, then speech is our light, for by that we sit, work, go out, and come back. Even though we cannot see our own hand in the dark, we can hear what is said and move toward the person speaking. Janaka, when the sun sets, Yajnavalkya, and the moon sets, and the fire goes out, and no one speaks, what is the light of man? Yajnavalkya, the self indeed is the light of man, your majesty, for by that we sit, work, go out, and come back. Janaka, who is that self? Yajnavalkya, the self, pure awareness, shines as the light within the heart surrounded by the senses. Only seeming to think, seeming to move, the self neither sleeps, nor wakes, nor dreams. When the self takes on a body, he seems to assume the body's frailties and limitations. But when he sheds the body at the time of death, the self leaves all these behind. The human being has two states of consciousness, one in this world, the other in the next. But there is a third state between them, not unlike the world of dreams, in which we are aware of both worlds, with their sorrows and joys. When a person dies, it is only the physical body that dies. That person lives on in a non-physical body, which carries the impressions of his past life. It is these impressions that determine his next life. In this intermediate state, he makes and dissolves impressions by the light of the self. In that third state of consciousness, there are no chariots, no horses drawing them or roads on which to travel, but he makes up his own chariots, horses, and roads. In that state there are no joys or pleasures, but he makes up his own joys and pleasures. In that state there are no lotus ponds, no lakes, no rivers, but he makes up his own lotus ponds, lakes, and rivers. It is he who makes up all these from the impressions of his past or waking life. It is said of these states of consciousness that in the dreaming state, when one is sleeping, the shining self who never dreams, who is ever awake, watches by his own light the dreams woven out of past deeds and present desires. In the dreaming state, when one is sleeping, the shining self keeps the body alive with the vital force of prana and wanders wherever he wills. In the dreaming state, when one is sleeping, the shining self assumes many forms, eats with friends, indulges in sex, sees fearsome spectacles. But he is not affected by anything, because he is detached and free. And after wandering here and there in the state of dreaming, enjoying pleasures and seeing good and evil, he returns to the state from which he began. As a great fish swims between the banks of a river as it likes, so does the shining self move between the states of dreaming and waking, as an eagle, weary after soaring in the sky, folds its wings and flies down to rest in its nest, so does the shining self enter the state of dreamless sleep, where one is freed from all desires. The self is free from desire, free from evil, free from fear. As a man in the arms of his beloved is not aware of what is without and what is within, so a person in union with the self is not aware of what is without and what is within, for in that unitive state all desires find their perfect fulfillment. There is no other desire that needs to be fulfilled, and one goes beyond sorrow. In that unitive state, there is neither father nor mother, neither worlds nor gods, nor even scriptures. In that state, there is neither thief nor slayer, neither low caste nor high, neither monk nor ascetic. The self is beyond good and evil, beyond all the suffering of the human heart. In that unitive state, one sees without seeing, for there is nothing separate from him, smells without smelling, for there is nothing separate from him, tastes without tasting, for there is nothing separate from him, speaks without speaking, for there is nothing separate from him, hears without hearing, for there is nothing separate from him, touches without touching, for there is nothing separate from him, thinks without thinking, for there is nothing separate from him, knows without knowing, for there is nothing separate from him. Where there is separateness, one sees another, smells another, tastes another, speaks to another, hears another, touches another, thinks of another, knows another. But where there is unity, one without a second, that is the world of Brahman. This is the supreme goal of life, the supreme treasure, the supreme joy. Those who do not seek the supreme goal live on but a fraction of this joy. Janaka, I give you another 1,000 cows. Please teach me more of the way to self-realization. Yajnavalkya. As a heavily laden cart creaks as it moves along, the body groans under its burden when a person is about to die. When the body grows weak through old age or illness, the self separates himself as a mango or fig or banyan fruit frees itself from the stalk and returns the way he came to begin another life. Just as when a king is expected to visit a village, the mayor and all the other officials turn out to welcome him with food and drink, all creation awaits the person who sheds his body, having realized Brahman. Here he comes, they say. Here comes Brahman himself. But the senses, while that man lies dying, gather around and mourn the self's departure as courtiers mourn when their king is about to leave. When body and mind grow weak, the self gathers in all the powers of life and descends with them into the heart. As prana leaves the eye, it ceases to see. He is becoming one, say the wise. He does not see. He is becoming one. He no longer hears. He is becoming one. He no longer speaks or tastes or smells or thinks or knows. By the light of the heart, the self leaves the body by one of its gates, and when he leaves, prana follows, and with it all the vital powers of the body. He who is dying merges in consciousness, and thus consciousness accompanies him when he departs, along with the impressions of all that he has done, experienced, and known. As a caterpillar, having come to the end of one blade of grass, draws itself together and reaches out for the next, so the self, having come to the end of one life and dispelled all ignorance, gathers in his faculties and reaches out from the old body to a new. As a goldsmith fashions an old ornament into a new and more beautiful one, so the self, having reached the end of the last life and dispelled all ignorance, makes for himself a new, more beautiful shape, like that of the Devas or other celestial beings. The self is indeed a Brahman, but through ignorance people identify it with intellect, mind, senses, passions, and the elements of earth, water, air, space, and fire. This is why the self is said to consist of this and that, and appears to be everything. As a person acts, so he becomes in life. Those who do good become good. Those who do harm become bad. Good deeds make one pure. Bad deeds make one impure. So, we are said to be what our desire is. As our desire is, so is our will. As our will is, so are our acts. As we act, so we become. We live in accordance with our deep, driving desire. It is this desire at the time of death that determines what our next life is to be. We will come back to earth to work out the satisfaction of that desire. But not those who are free from desire. They are free because all their desires have found fulfillment in the self. They do not die like the others, but, realizing Brahman, they merge in Brahman. So it is said, when all the desires that surge in the heart are renounced, the mortal becomes immortal. When all the knots that strangle the heart are loosened, the mortal becomes immortal, here, in this very life. As the skin of a snake is sloughed onto an anthill, so does the mortal body fall. But the self, freed from the body, merges in Brahman, infinite life, eternal light. Janaka, I give you another 1,000 cows. Please, teach me more of the way to self-realization. Yajnavalkya. Those who realize the self enter into the peace that brings complete self-control and perfect patience. They see themselves in everyone and everyone in themselves. Evil cannot overcome them because they overcome all evil. Sin cannot consume them because they consume all sin. Free from evil, free from sin and doubt, they live in the kingdom of Brahman. Your Majesty, this kingdom is yours. Janaka. Venerable One, I offer myself and my kingdom in your service.